So we're ready to get started, and I hope you're all comfortable. I'd first like to mention the generous support of Dutch Nagel and all that he's done for this organization, and especially for all these wonderful lectures that we're hearing today, tomorrow, and even yesterday. So, see, I've got all your churchgoers up front. That's great. Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about our speaker, who is Jim Koweek. And believe it or not, his session on everything isn't spiny in Arizona. Now, I'm a master gardener, so I'm going to challenge this guy afterwards if he doesn't come through for us. But he works with plants, seeds, and rock, all in Arizona. He's the author of Grassland Plant Identification and owner of the Arizona Revegetation and Monitoring Company. Another big area we need to question him on. That is so interesting to me. There's an artistic side to this gentleman too. He plays the mandolin. He won't tell me where, how late at night, or any of that. So I don't know. It's up to you. Okay, Jim.
All right, thank you. I usually get that much applause total, so maybe I'll just call it right now. Where do you want to start here? I am prepared, but I think I was prepared for something different than what we're going to do here. I won't be playing mandolin. This is kind of a secret, but till tonight at the cafe in Sonoya at 5 o'clock. So if anybody wants to come out, I got Kevin Pikulis coming down from Tucson. He's very good. So that leads me to my first thing in complete disclosure and transparency. I'm a commercial guy. I don't work for an agency. I don't run a volunteer type thing. So I will slide in several commercials. If it gets to be too much, holler at me. And speaking of hollering at me, I would much rather, if you had any questions as we go along, please just kind of get my attention and holler it out, because I've done way too many of these things where you wait till the very end and everybody's about half asleep by then. And any questions like, no, can I go get lunch? Where can I go get a beer? That kind of stuff. So if there's anything that I say that you have questions about, let me know, okay? Right then, and we will, and believe me, I'm built to be sidetracked. How many are not from like right here in Cochise County? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, where are y'all from?
Albuquerque.
Okay, I was up there in February. Played a Society of Range Management conference up there at the fairgrounds, or they call it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. For those who are here, who's gotten any rain? What, I gotta hear some numbers.
7 inches.
7 inches over on
San Pedro.
San Pedro.
2+ inches.
Where are you?
Over by the park. Downtown's here this.
2+ inches. Sorry. I'm gonna be making jokes. That's like.
5 to 6 in Sierra Vista.
Wow. Everybody was gonna do that. So,
What do you have, Tim, on your plate?
I don't want to say, but I will. We're between 14 and 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it started out in June. It's the best June I've ever seen. We had over 4 in June. And the wash has been running clear. I haven't seen that in years. There's a wash that goes right through my property. It's been running clear, and I haven't seen that in years. I got a trip coming up here, and I even got my fly rod out and did some practice casting in the wash. So kayaks are coming out next.
And your property is?
On the west side of the Wachukas in Canal.
Oh.
All right. So I had thought I was going to be talking to Ethel and Walter from Wisconsin here, so I kind of prepared it like that. So we're going to jump around a whole lot. If you want to go deeper into anything we're talking about, let me know, and we'll do that. So the first slide, I don't know, it's kind of dark, but I kind of liked it. But the other thing, and being transparent, I really don't know a lot about birds. So, and that's not false humbleness. You know, sometimes when you walk up to somebody, hey, you know anything about whatever, you play music? It's like, yeah, I play a little, and then the dude can like really wail. Like, this is not false humbleness. And I will prove, okay, here's the deal. I will prove that to you later on, okay? Towards the end of the presentation, I will prove how little I know. But anyway, I just kind of like this slide because it's a raven sitting on a bare grass flower stalk. It means nothing other than it doesn't have you thinking about what else we're going to be talking about. It's just put up there to hold your attention. Now, let's see. Oh, look at that. All right, that's a grassland. And if y'all know this, I'm sorry, but I'm going to just get into a little bit. That's a grassland. That's taken in Sonoya at Las Ciénegas. Most of these pictures were taken by my buddy Dale Armstrong, and you'll notice the difference on the ones that I took. I don't have the equipment or the ability that he does, but that's a grassland, and that's pretty good. We could spend 40 minutes just talking about this. You'll see the rolling hills. You'll see not much out there, except for when you get in the bottom, where it collects a little bit of moisture and get a little break for the wind. That gives a chance for some other stuff to come up. So those are probably mesquite starting down there. And if you want to talk about mesquite extraction and something like that, we can get off on that tangent, because I've done a lot of work for the university and some other places on what happens when you take out mesquite. But at any rate, so it's a grassland. Grasslands happen when you have good summer rains and cold winters, freezing winters. And if you look at a map of the world, and I don't have this slide, but if you look at a map of the world, you look about the same distance from the equator all around the world. That's where all your big grasslands are. You know, in Africa would be about the same distance from the equator. Down in South America, about the same distance from the equator. It has to do with the winds, basically. So the things that make a grassland are, wait, this is good, are grasses. This is good. That's why you pay the big money. This is the best show at its price range. Right. But one of the things that is kind of hard to tell in this slide, I'll show you, it's not just like if you're in some kind of forest, a lot of times it's the same kind of tree, and you'll see the same vegetation over and over and over again. Grasslands have a lot of individuals, and they have a lot of diversity until we mess them up. They have a lot of diversity of species in there. So as things are getting hotter and drier, you'll start to see, and we're already seeing it, we're seeing desert creep up. This shows, this is a demonstration of my maturity right here. There's a Palo Verde right in Sonoya, a blue Palo Verde, and there never used to be Palo Verdes in there. And I hate them. I mean, that's a Sonoran desert plant. It's not that I hate Palo Verdes, but it's different than the grasslands. And every time I go by, I flip it off because I don't want to see it there. What you see in Palo Verdes, I'm seeing a lot more cholla. And a good buddy of mine has told me that the prickly pear that he's seeing are a bunch of Phaeacantha, are the lower desert prickly pear, and they're working their way up here instead of more of the natives. So we are already, it's not a question of will things change, it's a question of things have changed and how much farther it's going to go. Okay? That's not a political statement, that's reality. And you'll see way more of those mesquites. This was taken in 2014. It would be really interesting to go to this exact spot right now and see how many more. You can see the little piece, if I can do it without finding something. Oh, look at that. Okay, you see those little mesquites out there? I will almost guarantee that you'll see at least, you missed all the good stuff, I'm sorry. I'll repeat it, that's okay. You'll probably see 2-3 times the mesquites out there. Is that a good thing? Is not a good thing? It depends on how you're trying to manage the land. Okay, so here we go. So that's a close-up of some of that area, and this is just to show you. All right, that shows you that. I don't know how many square feet that is, but that's cane beard grass right there. You can see some kind of 3-on up there. That looks like blue grambler right there, side oats grambler right there, and I'm just kind of picking these out. A lot more blue grambler right there. And so the whole point of this slide is, as I said, there's a lot of individual species I mean, there's a lot of individuals and there's a lot of individual species there too. So that's real typical of a grassland. So when we started out trying to do this book here, this is just a vague plot, the real one. It was just going to be about grasses. That was our purpose, because everybody's fascinated by grasses. Not really. And I should have probably said at the beginning, one of the overall points I'm going to try to make today is how unique we are as an area right here. Topographically, that's probably not the right word, but we're part of Mexico. The United States starts, up around I-10 someplace. And that's why, oh, here comes a bird comment, get ready. That's why we get all these cool birds that other people don't get to see, and this is the only place. And I will prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt, not about birds, but when we get to some of the more colorful plants that'll keep you awake, I'll talk about their ranges and where they actually are. Which reminds me, does anybody know, does anybody know how many counties there are in the United States? Oh, you're dumb.
10,000.
How many did you say?
10,000.
Okay, there's 3,000, I wrote it down. I didn't, this has nothing to do with anything other than I wanted to show you that I prepared for this talk here. 3,006 counties, and that's not counting the District of Columbia, it's not counting the 64 parishes in Louisiana, right? So keep that number in mind, we'll get back to that. We're going to get back to
That grassland there, is that all ungrazed?
No, this will be grazed.
That's grazed.
Yeah, that's definitely, this is part of Las Ciénegas, I'm pretty sure. I didn't take this picture, but, and Las Ciénegas is grazed by a guy named Ian Tomlinson, he's over in Sonoya. And so, let's go on to the next slide.
If it hadn't been grazed, what would it be like?
Exactly like that.
It'd still be the same.
Yeah, grazing, and I don't, we only have an hour, but if grazing is managed properly, I believe it's beneficial. When it's not managed properly, it's detrimental. I mean, that's not a real radical concept. Unlike, cows are not inherently evil. I was wondering if there would be people here that had never heard of caliche or were wondering what caliche was. So just real brief, because when I talk to friends, one of my good friends who's had ranches all over the Southwest, when he talks, he says the first thing he looks at in a ranch is soil. He doesn't look at the carrying capacity, because that's what the real estate guys want to sell you. You can run 500 head on here or whatever. You can, he doesn't even look at the grasses. He looks at the soil, because that dictates the potential for recovery if it's not in good shape. So caliche, very short version. Any geologists in here? I can make crap up. So what caliche really is, that white stuff right there, that's caliche. Caliche is, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and I've heard people actually use it for clay, and it's not clay. It's a impermeable or semi-permeable layer of very basic alkaline soil, and it basically is formed from when limestone's rained on over and over and over again. It starts to dissolve, and that dissolved water will get down a certain distance. And in the Southwest, that distance is not very deep. When it rains, it doesn't go down 10 feet around here most of the time, even if you get 14 inches. And other people have only gotten 2, and I'm sorry about that. It goes down a certain distance, and then it starts to collect, and that's what gives you that caliche layer. So why is that important to what we're talking about? Your soil kind of dictates what plants are going to be happy there. And there are plants, I do a lot of rangeland monitoring. When you're out, I can look at the plants and can tell you without digging a hole what the soil is going to look like underneath it a lot of times. All right, let's keep. All right, so when we started on that Grasslands book right there, the first thing after one day out in the field, it's like, oh wow, there's way more, there's way more to grasslands than grasses, And when you really, okay, I'm really gonna get out here now. Last year, everybody was just we had probably the worst drought in recent history, meaning the past 100 years, 2 years ago. It was horrible. It was really horrible. And then last year, everything greened up. It looked like, depending on your frame of reference, Ireland or Alabama, depending on what you like to think about as green. And everybody thought, this is wonderful, it's over. But if you went out and looked at the plants, what I'm really looking for is perennial grasses, perennial species. And what had happened was it was green and it was beautiful, and I was very, very, very happy to see it. But there were a lot of annuals out there, which is the start of the recovery. But there's a difference between the start of the recovery and being recovered. Okay? So, anyway, I don't know how I got that far out there, but this is just a little plant called Arizona Blue Eyes. It's just a little native flower, very pretty. Those are about somewhere between the size of a diamond and nickel. I'm trying to promote commercial activities for people with ambition, way more ambition than me. This is a plant that should be on the landscape tree, and I've never seen it in there. Nobody's ever grown it out that I've ever seen. Okay. That should be like the poster child for plants around here. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, so that one
San
is,
Pedro.
there you go. Yeah, San Pedro daisy.
Yeah, daisy,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, unless you want, we will avoid botanical names today, okay? If somebody's, it used to be Zexmania podocephalus, and then they changed it to something else that I can't remember. But anyway, that's a very cool plant, and it's a good butterfly plant. But the thing about it, and again, this is getting into some basic stuff, but it's got some really nice survival strategies going on there. If you see that plant and you take your hand and rub it on the leaf, it feels like sandpaper. It feels like about 100 grit sandpaper, which is a good way to, those little bumps send off heat, and it's a play to keep the plant cooler. But what you can't see there is if you were to dig it up, the root system, they're not bulbs, or are they corms? Yeah, maybe corms. Looks like a little tarantula. Like there's all these fleshy, woody, fleshy roots that hang down in the ground. And during these summer rains, if you get them, it takes in all this moisture, and then, of course, when it dries out, it puts all that carbohydrates, all those resources down into the root system. And that's how it's able to come back next year before even the rains start. So that's a great survival mechanism. Okay, so here we go. All right, so in order to prove, and you're gonna get pretty sick of this, I'll warn you ahead of time. That's San Pedro daisy in the entire 3,006 counties plus 64 parishes and the state. And Washington DC, I will not repeat that, all right, is found in this whole continental United States and Alaska and Hawaii in exactly 3 counties in Arizona, 1 county in New Mexico. Okay, I'm using USDA guidelines on this. If you go, there's a really good site called SignNet, which is very, very technical. And there may have been people who found it otherwise, but basically you get my point. This is not a plant. You don't find this plant in Tucson. You don't find it, in the White Mountains. You only find it right here in the borderlands. Okay, keep going. Oh, another one we could spend all 40 minutes on. This is pretty much, I kind of go here most mornings, like if I'm not working, take the dogs out for a walk, and this is a spot on the west side of Wachuca, looking out at the Santa Ritas. Again, if you could just think of the overall picture of where we're at here. We think of it as hot as heck, and we think of it as dry, but you can see snow up on the peaks of the San Pedro. And what I really like about this slide is it shows, we love to categorize things. That's a grassland plant, that's a desert plant, that's a whatever. But you can kind of see in this picture here that those are junipers, alligator junipers. On the slopes right there, you see the oaks. All over, you can't really see them up there, but you have grasses up there at 10,000 feet or whatever that peak is. You have grasses there, but you have one stinking cholla that made an appearance. So that's what I really love about this country. It's got everything. It really does. There's a little bit of everything in there. Now, if you notice why this is why this slide is so important, because as soon as I tell people I get 100 frosts a year where I live, what's your elevation? And I say 5,000 feet. And it doesn't make sense, but I sit at the bottom of a canyon and I have these peaks, not those, but the ones you can't see that way. I have these peaks pitching 2,000-3,000 feet of cold air down on me. So that's how I get 100 frosts a year. So people, what's your elevation? What's your elevation? And it really is important to be aware of your elevation, your soil type, all that kind of stuff. But you don't want to just isolate, and the soils, like I said, you don't want to isolate one factor. Because if you look at that slope right there, what do you see? What's anybody knows about there? If I were to take a laser level, which this is not, like my hands are shaking, and run it exactly the same to the same footage right across there, that would be your elevation there. But without making you sweat too bad. Those are south side slopes. Those are north side slopes. If you were trying to make everything be if you're trying to put things in boxes, that's grassland, that's woodland, San Madrid. You got mostly oak and juniper there. You have grasses there. Exact same elevation. So it's all about
Microhabitat.
there we go. Microhabitats, exposure, whatever you want to call it. But it's just something to keep in mind when we try to cram things into physical boxes.
Jim, what's your minimum temperature you recorded on your property?
I don't get much below zero, but I get zero.
You have gotten zero?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, last year, I know we hit single digits. I know we were under 4. I don't know if we hit 0. But you remember back in the great freeze of
Yeah, we hit 4.
you hit 4, yeah, we weren't that much colder. It compacted and we kind of stayed there. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So we made a reference earlier to annuals. I probably should have just got this slide out of here, but it was in there. Annuals, perennials, basically everybody in the room knows what, and the different annuals are like rock stars. They come up, they grow, they flower, they go to seed, and they die. It's like living a rock star lifestyle. Perennials are more mature, like Sandy here. They take a while to reach their potential. Okay, so that's sandbur. Everybody hates that plant. Yeah, I don't even want to. That's research. Dang it, that's research right there. All right, it's the little things that make a difference. I like this slide for a couple reasons, but a lot of, this is plant ID, and we're just going to get a little bit into that. Everywhere I go, people want to know how you can tell the difference between blue grama and hairy grama because they look very similar. And I told her we're going to jump around. But if you look at the little spike, that's hairy grama right there. And the no spike on the end is blue grama. And blues usually curve, but hairy can curve too. But the reason I really like this slide, because if you look at that, that's me, right? That actually is my hand. I know it looks like I'm a sharecropper or something, but if you look very close, there's the end. My wife doesn't like this slide because there's an indent of 2 strings. This was taken when I was probably supposed to be working, but was playing the mandolin with the double course strings on it. So that's why I like that slide. So you got to bear with that. Okay. Get a little bit of plant ID stuff, and we're going to try to tie it back into the soils. But that is alligator juniper. One of it, and you're seeing more and more alligators, except it seems to me, never read this, but junipers need winter moisture. And without that winter moisture, no matter how much they get in the summer, they really struggle. And I don't know how many I had, mature trees, I probably had another 12 or 15, and I'm talking about 12 to 14 or 15 foot junipers die this year because there was basically no winter moisture. So that's alligator juniper, because we have 2 junipers here. We have alligator and we have 1 seed juniper. Okay, now somebody's told me somebody's tried to reclassify and there are no more 1 seed junipers south of I-10. For our purposes, this is a 1 seed juniper, okay? These trees look pretty similar. You have that, and you have that. There is a color difference in them right here, but it's not always out there. So how do you tell these? I didn't know, I just say, I didn't know who I was talking with today. I don't know if this stuff is interesting. If it's not, don't be afraid to say, hey, move on, next slide, and we'll deal with that. But how do you tell the difference? That bark looks like an alligator. That's the alligator juniper. Okay, oh, before we go anywhere else, look at that. That's a very cool plant right there. We're gonna talk about these guys in just a second. But that's mountain yucca or yucca shadii. And if you're looking for landscape plants, that's one of those succulents that can actually take and almost prefer shade. So if you're looking for a succulent, something you're not gonna have to water very much, it can take shade, that's the one for you right there. And that one looks a lot like something we're gonna look at in a second. So hope you can remember all this. That's long striated bark, and that's your one seed juniper. So, was that a question or?
Do you know anyone who is raising the alligator for sale?
No. Your best bet on that, and I had a nursery for a lot of years. Well, it just seemed like a lot. No, it really, no, it was a lot of fun. The problem with both going nursery on both alligators and the one seeds is they grow very slow, especially compared to Arizona cypress. And most people who are not gifted plant people like we are can't tell the difference, especially at a distance. So a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old Arizona cypress is going to be this tall, and a 2 or 3-year-old juniper, native juniper, is going to be that tall. So people aren't willing to dedicate the space in the nursery to it. So your best bet, if you want them, is find somebody who has some on their property, like a rancher, and they transplant pretty well. I've dug up a bunch of them. If you dig them in the winter time when it's wet. So there are some things beyond your control, like the if it's wet clause. But if you can dig them up, they do transplant pretty easily. Okay. So the other thing, I don't want to go back to those slides, but if I see an alligator juniper, I am pretty sure it's going to be a clay soil underneath it, or at least a loamy soil. If I see a one seed juniper, it's going to be alkaline soil underneath it, for the most part. Plants are, remember Dave Epley? Everybody knew Dave. Dave was hilarious. Plants can't follow rules. And he was right. Plants don't read, they can't follow rules. But basically, if you see a one seed juniper, you're probably looking at alkaline soil like that caliche slide, that second or third. See, this does tie together, like very loosely, but it does kind of tie together. We're going to tie it together a little tighter here. And if you're looking at an alligator, it's probably maybe just a little higher in elevation, but not necessarily, but it's probably not going to be pure white dirt or caliche. Okay, the yuccas, and we're going to get into the yuccas in a second here, but that's how you can tell your yucca shadii or your mountain yucca from the rest of them. It has that kind of little bit of red edge on it. Okay, so that's good. All right, that's very similar to your mountain yucca, but that's banana yucca. And the banana yuccas are divided into 3 different varieties. We're not going to worry about that. But that's a very common yucca, but the leaves are hairy on this one, usually, but not always. But if it doesn't have the red margin, then you're probably looking at banana yucca, not mountain yucca. All right. That is soap tree yucca. I have a newfound fascination with yuccas here. That's soap tree yucca. That is the state tree of New Mexico. Did you know that? You knew that. So, yeah, and I can see why. Sorry. That's the state tree. The thing about this plant right here is whatever you're seeing above ground, it's probably that much below ground in root, not necessarily, in trunk and root together. So they're really a booger. Like to transplant that, you'd have to go down probably 4 or 5 feet to get to the bottom of it. They don't make good transplants. But the thing that's fascinating about yuccas is their flowers. And we'll just touch on that a little bit. This is just something this is amazing. And if you know this, I can never hear it too much. But at any rate, yuccas, each species of yucca, and correct me if I mess this one up, okay? Each species of yucca flowers, it flowers white, it flowers at night mainly, and it's somewhat fragrant, and it's trying to attract a moth. A single specific moth, like the 3 types of yuccas that we looked at would have 3 different types of moths that pollinate it. And then those little boogers come in and they lay their eggs, and their eggs hatch, and then the larvae eat part of the seed, but not all of it. So that's a pretty cool relationship. I mean, that I don't know how many years, I've been doing this stuff for way too long, but, or not long enough, I don't know. And somebody says, have you been doing this your whole life? And I say, not yet, but, anyway, but if you think about that, like it's flowering, it's looking for one particular moth. That moth pollinates it. It pollinates that specific species, and then those little larvae eat some of the seed, but not, if you have a chance and you see a seed pod, and some of the yuccas are in seed right now, crack one open, and you'll see the white seed it's not fertile. The white seed is just wasted. You'll see black seed in there. And if you look at some of those black seed, there's just this little hole drilled through it. And that's those guys eating the seed. This ain't happening. We're in big trouble now, folks. Anybody got any idea what
Let me see if we can.
This is why we can't have nice things in here. Okay, thank you. Oh, there we go. Mesquites. We're just gonna get in mesquites very little, I'm sorry. That's not pretending to be dumb. All right, that's mesquites on your left right there. That's regular, that's your velvet mesquite, one that's native to most here. That's Texas honey mesquite. As you go farther, the farther east you go, when you get out in Cochise County, they start to mix. And it's this terrible, like you can have little scrubby mesquites this tall and you can have one next to it there. It's just this big mix of genetics. And I'm making that up, but that's been my observation. And then the farther east you go, you get into more of the Texas honey mesquite. We don't have to spend a lot of time on mesquite. Has anybody got any questions, by the way, before we look at this beautiful slide?
How do you get rid of them?
How do you get rid of them?
Because you said you were involved with that.
Yeah,
They keep coming back. If you don't.
yeah, the best way, if you really want to get rid of it, first question would be why? And if you have a reason, dig them out. They have dumped lots of chemical. They had all these studies that came out of Texas, okay? We only have so much time, so please hold your applause for Texas till we're done. No, seriously. They did all these studies in Texas, and they were sure they had the right chemical formula that could be aerial applied and would knock them down and would get rid of them.
That tebutyron?
No, it was a chemical, it was a mix of chemicals, and it was called Sundero.
Oh, I know that one too.
I quickly changed the word, and you'll hear people refer to it now as send dinero. The only people who made out on it were the chemical companies, because it just flat out didn't work. And you got this flush where it knocked these mesquites back to the ground. And everybody thought, ding dong, the witch is dead. We don't have this plant. And then they noticed that the next year, these little flags started coming out. And I would say within 7 years of the spraying or so, you can't tell they was sprayed in the first place. So you dumped all that chemical, you spent all that money, and you got no result. So to get back to on the projects that I've seen that have been successful, it's mechanical removal. If you want to get rid of it. It's not cheap, but if you want to get rid of it.
Is that the grinder mechanical? I forget the name of the device.
No, that's a masticator,
Masticator.
mastication, and that's a complete waste of money too. 'Cause it just-
Backhoe.
Yeah, you grinds them down to the stumps and then they just grow back. And that was just, the fork did a lot of that stuff, and it leaves a lot of little stubs sticking up. And the first time I took my tractor on there, it was like, the stubs had dried up and they were like little pointed sticks sticking up, and my tires went every time I hit one. So I ended up having to fill my tires solid to be able to drive on that stuff. But no, the mastication is not, the Forest Service has gotten away from that. Everybody's gotten away from it. If you get a backhoe in there, and dig them out, that's the best way to do it. Okay, so this is, we're gonna talk about native plants here just a little bit. That's a beautiful native plant, right? Everybody likes that one. That's cat claw. And if you haven't done any hiking around, you've been shredded by cat claw. You don't wear, this is the second best pair of pants that I own. And if I'm monitoring and I'm going through this stuff, I do not wear these pants. I wear some cheap jeans because I know they're gonna get shredded. But things aren't as easy or obvious as they seem, because you can tell that it's that particular cat claw, and some people call it wait a bit, because you see those thorns on there? They're hooked down. So even if the plant isn't in leaf or if it's not in leaf or in flower, the thorn's hooking down, that puts you in the cat claw category, okay? Now there's another one that's first cousin, and that is called velvet pod mimosa. Now that's a pretty, it shreds you too, but those thorns go straight out. Difference between thorns and spines, I just kind of learned this the other day. Spines are modified leaves, like on a cactus. Those spines are actually leaves, and thorns are modified branches. Who knew, huh? I didn't, but I'm working on another project that I'll be promoting in a few minutes, and that's where I learned that from. So if you had a choice between this plant or this plant, what would you choose? Good question. Okay, everybody pretty much likes that one, except, ooh, there's a bird. There's a bird. Okay, I told you we're gonna loop this stuff back in very loosely. So somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a
Violet-crowned hummingbird.
there you go, female violet-crowned hummingbird that people come from all over the country to go to Patagonia to see. And that's sitting on, more important, than when I look at that picture, I'm not looking, it's like, oh, that's a bird, but look at those thorns. Look at those thorns curved downward. That's sitting on one of those mesquite, or the mimosas, the wait a minute bush that everybody hates. So I'm not saying go plant these and you're gonna get those in your yard. I think this was just, but it just shows that things aren't always as easy as we would like them. Native plants, okay? That is a flower stalk from a Wachuka agave, native agave around here. And that is an egg, I can tell just from looking, from a ladderback woodpecker. See? I told you there's bird pictures in there. And so I don't know, that may be going in to feed the chick, I don't know. But that's kind of a cool picture too. All right. Native grasses. Oh, I better speed up here a little bit. Okay, that's a plant called bull panic. We're getting to the depressants portion of the program here. That's a native grass called bull panic. Two things about it real quickly. If you look at the seeds right here, look how big those individual seeds are. Okay, that's part of the millet family, so you can see each seed, no problem. Birds come along and eat those seeds, and on this plant in particular, it grows out of a little bulb. It looks like a little onion if you were to dig this plant up. And quail, I keep being told that quail really like them, and those bulbs are harder than rocks, so maybe I'm not digging them up. But quail like them, turkeys like them, so that's what native plants like native grasses draw. Okay, can you see those bulbs?
And that's the quail that digs it up.
Yep, that's quail digging them up. So, and that's turkeys in there. You know, that's big in my house. That's the wash that's right where I was fly fishing yesterday. Okay, so that's what happens with native grasses. Another native grass, Cytogramma. Look how big those seeds are. Okay, now that's not the actual seed, but that's kind of the seed hull. But you will be able to see the seed that comes out of there. There's probably, if I'm remembering this right, about 300,000 per pound. Okay, so that sounds like a lot, but keep that number in mind. All right. Now we're getting to the depressing portion of the program. That's a plant called Layman Glovegrass. And Layman Glovegrass was imported from Africa in the early 1920s, because people were, a lot of this area was in pretty bad shape. So people went all over the world looking for something that would grow here. And they found something. They did too good a job. Imagine that. So they brought back several of these plants, and this is probably the biggest varmint around here. When you go south, is it 90 or 92 and go down by Hereford, and you're looking right and left, and you're seeing thousands of acres, literally, of beautiful native grass. It's not native grass, it's this stuff. Okay, Jimmy, why is that bad? I mean, it's green, it holds the soil, and it does hold the soil. But what happens is, Layman's in particular, that's Boer's lovegrass, that's its first cousin, that's weeping, let's go back to Layman's. Layman's lovegrass, remember we just said that Side Oats Grandma has about 300,000 seeds per pound? Layman's lovegrass has about 5 million seeds per pound. So when you think about it, that seed is tiny. And not too many birds or insects can do anything with it. So brief snapshot is when you come in, and this plant is an African species, and it did really, really well. It does really, really well in the conditions in South Africa under extreme, extreme herbivory. And when we brought it over here, we didn't bring anything that's going to keep it in check. Now, we tend to screw up when we do that too, so I'm not saying we should have done it. But if you went out and you recruit these all-stars, this best of the best from where they were growing, and don't bring anything to keep it in check, that's how things get out of hand. And so you have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of acres that have been, that native grasses have been replaced by Layman's lovegrass. Some of the other grasses. And it completely changes because, remember I said it starts with the dirt, where you have your dirt and the next layer would be probably soil microbes, but on top of that you have plants. And then you start to get into the things that feed on plants. If that feed is not there, the insects change, the birds change, the rodents change, and you change the whole thing. We'll skip, that's weeping lovegrass, too much lovegrass. That's my least favorite plant right now. That's one called yellow blue stem. That's a Eurasian plant that's come in, and that's going to make Layman's lovegrass look like child's play because almost nothing will touch this one. And this one spreads by runners. This one spreads by seed. This one outcompetes everything.
I have a question about that.
Yes, sir.
I have like, crap. I know, and my question is, well, it got really big about 3 years ago, laid down, and now it's on that. The question is, if you go in and mow it, will it,
You'll have a beautiful lawn.
so it won't ever give the other stuff a chance to come back?
No, I got called down to do some reseeding for a guy, and he said, I said, what do you want it to look like? You know, he said, well, I want it to look, I said, do you want, because I work with natives, I said, you want it to look like this? No, I want it to look like this, and I saw one of the prettiest lawns you've ever seen, and it was this stuff. When you mow it, it sends out runners and does it, yeah.
So you can't just keep it from seeding by mowing?
No, the Forest Service sent somebody down last year, 2 years ago, and they went and hooked up with a buddy of mine, a rancher, and they wanted to try to work a plan to combat this stuff. And the guy got out of his truck and walked around part of the morning and drove back to Albuquerque. Said, nope, it's out of hand. And that shows you, that's the extreme southern part of the Wachuka Ranch, but that's yellow blue stem. That plant's a varmint. That's that. And
Will it outcompete Bermuda grass?
don't know. That's a good question.
That's pretty tough grass.
That's pretty tough, yeah. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't
Can't
know.
burn it?
No, all this stuff burns hotter than the natives and tends to, like, if on the fort, they're constantly doing this battle where they want to get rid of the shrub encroachment and bring back grasslands. But if you burn it, Layman's comes back. So it's this constant battle between the divisions of natural resources on the fort. What's the right thing to do? Okay, so I think that's milky, crusty stuff. If you want more depressing stuff, come out to the cafe tonight and I'll sing some really sad songs. We're doing a lot of Merle Haggard, crying in your beers. Okay, there's no reason this slides in here other than to get your mind off the last one. This is Mexican show flower, sometimes called Arizona show flower. It's another plant. It grows out, its roots are tuberous, it stores moisture, and we're gonna burn through some of these pretty quickly. This is found in 4 counties in Arizona, 3 counties in New Mexico, and there's a question mark about Texas in there, so whether it makes it in there. But you'll see these same counties repeated, so you can assume that we have, southeast Arizona, a couple of southwestern New Mexico counties, and then some of the counties in Texas that have the same basic type of conditions. But that's a nice thing. It's blooming right now. Arizona blue curls, that's a beautiful plant. And one thing that I'd like to say is that that's a beautiful flower, and I don't know what's going on with these sex parts like hung over out like that.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. I don't know what it is. But a lot of our flowers are super, super interesting. But you gotta look at them closely, sometimes with a hand lens. These are about dime size or more. But they're really, really spectacular. So that one's found, let's see. Okay, yeah, same deal basically as the last one. That's dichondra. That's a native dichondra. People in the Midwest and the Northeast, they plant dichondra lawns in the shade and stuff. That's a native dichondra, and it grows in the shade really, really well. Again, 2 counties in Arizona, 2 counties in New Mexico, 6 in Texas, which for y'all keeping count, that's 2,994 that it doesn't grow in the whole country. Okay. If somebody's ambitious and is looking to make the big money at farmer's market, that's a plant called Mexican oregano. Some people call it lemon pea balm. I like it better than regular oregano. And my neighbors, some of them that have had families in that area for years and years, remember as kids going out in the hill to go pick oregano. So put a little water to it, and there's your next career.
This is the native one.
That's the native one.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And you use it for oregano? Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's a strange plant because it germinates in the cooler part in the wintertime. So if there's no rain in the wintertime, no matter how hard you look for it in the summertime, you're not gonna find it. So that's a nice one. Okay, I like that plant too, and that's up and all over the place right now. That's called supine bean. And that grows from kind of a fleshy root underground. It's got that pea-shaped flower. And I always thought that that would make a nice bedding plant for people. And I don't landscape. I live in a beautiful spot. It's too much work. But if you had a little yard or a lot and you wanted something to put in a planter, that would be a very cool plant. It's got green kind of fleshy leaves on it, and it kicks up those little orange flowers. It does more actual seed production underground than it does on top. It's like a peanut. I forget what that's called, but there's a word for that. This plant, and I'll get off this in a minute, this plant is found in 1 county in Arizona, Santa Cruz. And that means it's not found in, that means that's the only county in the country. Now, does that mean it's a rare and endangered plant? Heck no. I'm sure if you cross the border into Mexico, it's probably weedy. But, just again, my overall point, and I'm kidding around a lot, is how unique an area that we live in. This vegetation zone stops right about here. And that's why, going back to the bird thing, that's why we get all this stuff. Red zinnia, and we're kind of running out of time here. Red zinnia, I just like this plant. It's an annual zinnia. It's a true zinnia. It's got one of the strangest distribution things I've ever seen. It's in 3 counties in Arizona, and it's in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. I don't know how you explain something like that. I've seen stuff that exists like in here, and then in 1 county in central Texas. That was on somebody's bumper when they took their trailer back. You can be pretty sure about that, but I don't know how to explain that one. I'm gonna speed up here a little bit. That's very cool milkweed. Anything about that one? You know, in 6 counties total in here. That's a very cool plant. That's called Cochise beard tongue. It's a penstemon. You notice the dirt around it is almost pure white. It grows in very alkaline conditions. That plant is, if you read the books like Penstemons of North America, it doesn't even make it into the Penstemons of North America because we're not North America apparently. And this is Penstemon dasyphilus, and it's such an obscure plant that even when you type in on Google, Penstemon dasyphilus, I'm not gonna spell it for you, it tries to say, did you mean, yeah. So that's a very local, very cool plant. It flowers usually in the spring, except last summer it flowered. One of my favorite plants of all, that's Mexican star lily. And the reason, it grows from a little bulb. And one of the reasons it's my favorite plant because it only comes up when it rains. So if there's no summer rain, you don't see that plant that year. Okay. The obligatory sunset photo, every time you do a talk in Arizona, you have to close with a sunset photo. But wait, we're not done yet. Here's some bird pictures. Now, I promised you I would show how ignorant I am at birds. I saw this photo and I said, great, I'll put in a photo of a yellow-billed cuckoo. Everybody will think that's really cool. And I looked at it for a while, and this is the way it went. I said, well, I know it's an ash tree that it's in, I can tell that. But that little guy doesn't have a yellow bill. So I contacted my buddy Dale, who took all these pictures, and like, now what the heck is that? And, oh, that's it's a flycatcher, dark black-billed flycatcher. Does that sound right?
Thick-billed kingbird, isn't it?
Oh, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a thick-billed kingbird. Thank you.
That's a thick-billed kingbird nest. That is not a cuckoo nest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm little birds. I sure as heck don't know nests. But that was taken near the preserve in Patagonia. So, the obligatory Trojan picture. And that guy is saying, please buy this book. That's what he's saying. But here, I want to make an announcement, and this is the absolute first place that you're going to hear this. There's another work in process right now, and that is going to be, believe it or not, our desert plant ID.
Oh, great.
So,
How soon?
when I get off my butt and finish it. Dale's taken over 15,000 pictures. And so it's just a question, and I'm kind of through the first draft on it. So it will be a non-technical lower desert. And it's been really a stretch because I'm a grasslands guy. So. I just thought that's a very cool picture. That's all, folks. Anyway, any questions, and thanks for listening, by the way.
You consider that Sonoran Desert,
I'm sorry?
where you live?
No.
Do you
no,
consider that
absolutely
Sonoran
not.
Desert?
No.
You don't, okay.
No, okay. Everybody likes to think if you're in Arizona, it's the Sonoran Desert. And it's not. There's, where I live specifically is just this big mixture
Okay.
of everything. In eastern Arizona, I would call it, more Chihuahuan. From here kind of east, I would go Chihuahuan Desert. And there's difference in the deserts. What makes the Sonoran Desert, and we're much, much closer to Chihuahuan Desert here, but Chihuahuan Desert is much colder. You don't have the columnar cactus in there. It's much more shrub oriented. So that's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions here?
So what constitutes overgrazing? I've seen many places, ranches around here where the land just supports what looks like a green carpet, and you look at it closely, and the shoots are cut down by the cattle as short as they could be. Is that overgrazing, or?
Just because we could spend the next 2 hours talking about this, the Forest Service says 40% usage. That's what they like to say. And anything beyond that is more than they want to say. And they have ways to measure 40% usage by species or overall. What do I consider overgrazing? Overgrazing to me would be simply doing harm to the land. Taking more out than, because these lands have historically been grazed. They were mowed flat by herbivores, you know, in Pleistocene days. But we didn't have fencing back then. So that would be my definition of overgrazing is doing, you know, doing harm to the land. And it's not that easy, you know, I deal with this all the time. You know, somebody will go out there and see something that's kind of mowed down and they'll say, oh, that's overgrazed. Get out of your truck, buddy, or get out of your Prius or whatever. I'm sorry. I don't mean to insult anybody. But, you know, but do some work. It's not, those kind of answers are not always obvious.
So it will come back if it's clear.
Gosh, this is the worst answer in the world, but it depends. It depends on what it is, what the rain situation has been, and how many years that's been going on. What I really don't like to see is the same areas grazed the same time of year. That's when you can do harm. And especially this time of year on when plants are trying to grow to seed. Some species like blue grama, if you graze it early, it can actually spread. But if you hit it when it's trying to go to flower, you don't get a second chance. So again, I go back to what I'm comfortable is if what you're doing is doing harm, that would be considered. And I usually call it mismanagement because overgrazing is, you know, kind of become a political term. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I have noticed as you drive in the main road to Los Angeles, that from the prairie dog site there, that they're clearing the mesquite all the way up onto the hillside. Do you know what BLM's thinking, since I haven't tracked down any BLM employees to question them about that?
Yeah, it goes under the theory of, that was all mechanical.
Yes, I know, I saw it.
And it goes under the theory that mesquites outcompete grasses.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen. And so if you get rid of the mesquite, you get rid of the competition and the grasses have a chance to reestablish. And I've seen some very, very poor areas where I first walked in and the mesquites it looks like they're all sitting up on bass drums 18 inches in the air. And I thought, well, that's cool, they're holding all that soil. But what I didn't realize at the time is, no, that's the ground level. The ground level is the base of the mesquite. You have lost 18 inches of ground where it's eroded because the mesquites came in, well, the mesquites were there, they outcompeted native grasses, and the rest of it that wasn't directly held by those root roots.
So are they trying to get the prairie dogs to go up, because they cleared right from the prairie dog colony?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Okay, that's.
Yeah.
I think it's for pronghorn, because the mesquites provide the cover for the predators of the pronghorn.
Right, that would make sense too. Yeah, because, you know, pronghorns obviously are line of sight, and so I'm doing a lot of work with game and fish right now, and one of the things they do, they take these poles and they're 100 yards apart, I forget. They work in meters. They're 100 meters apart or something. And how much of the pole can you see? I call it pole dancing. And then they move and see in a big circle about maybe half an acre. And it's all line of sight, and that's for pronghorn. Because they want to make, you know, you can't, good friend of mine works for Game and Fish, and every time there's a wildfire, she's like, yes, yes, get rid of those trees, because she wants to move sheep and pronghorn into that area. So, anything else? All right, hey, thank y'all for listening. Appreciate it.
It's incredible. I have given away enough